right, everybody, I have a great guest. You can see her. She's amazing. And she's going to tell her story. Yes, we are on the founder's path, but this is all about learning from other founders on things that work and don't work. And if I go through this monologue, it's just going to bore you to tears anyway. So I'm going to just welcome Clea Ostendorf today.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Valerie, for having me. I'm Clea Ostendorf. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Wolfpack Security. We're an application security consultancy. We are going to hit 1 year in business on May 1st, and we are doing a lot of reflecting on how we got here and what we would do differently and what we're learning and, the future. So thrilled to share the bruises and the victories a little bit along the way with you.
Yeah. And I think that it's really interesting that you said that you're going on that 1 year. I know you have experience from prior companies and different things like that. And we all want it to be translatable. And then we get into the grind of that new startup and we forget, oh my gosh, so much, so much. And then you added the word consultancy, which puts it in the professional services realm that feels intangible to so many people. So how are you bridging some of this? How are you bridging that gap?
So I started this company with my co-founder. Actually, he approached me and he said, "Hey, I have some investors. I want to start a security company. Do you want to do it?" So that was a long journey on how we got to professional services and application security. But it's been incredible because the more we dug into it, meaning, we were talking to big companies, or we were talking, to anyone who would have a conversation with us. And what we kept finding is, while there are a lot of people who do what we do, the results of these larger firms were coming through as inconsistent and lower quality, despite what they were charging, despite how they were promoting things. So right off the bat, we knew we had something we could hold on to because our core services are in demand, which is pen testing and anything in application security, DevSecOps consulting. They're in demand, but they're also not being addressed in a way that is moving the needle forward. And the customers and people we were talking to were feeling like a number. So if we could take all those intangible things that weren't working in the industry and move that into our world and have that be the foundation from where we're building our professional services, we had something.
Yeah. So many times I talk to organizations and they're like, I'm a me too. But if I'm going to summarize that, you have figured out some differentiations as a collective, not one or another. Collectively, we're running into these issues. And then it kind of is a story of how you present that so that the value is being built. And I think for the audience too, let's be, some of the audience is very, very technologically savvy. But as you and I know in this industry, you're also speaking to manufacturing, healthcare. It can be defense, it could be government, it can be schools, it could be all sorts of things. So I'm going to give you just like 2 seconds. And this is not a pitch. Everybody, no pitch, but we need some definitions here, right? What is DevSecOps to people? What is
Okay.
pen testing?
Yeah, I'll make it as simple as possible. Basically, we are being hired to hack into people's products, right? That's anything from a mobile app to a website to a device, like a pacemaker.
And why is that important? I love that you said like a pacemaker. Why is that important?
We are the last line of defense before a product goes live. So you use some sort of banking app to transfer money, and right before this product goes live, they employ an organization like Wolfpack to say, test it and see if we could be hacked and what that hack would look like. And that's what we do. So, we are the last line of defense, which is both terrifying for the product developers who are like, please, I need to ship this. That's what that's my role. And then security, who, usually employs us, is saying, stop everything you're doing. There might be a problem. And we have to straddle that line of calling somebody's baby ugly and stopping the revenue generating release of something, and supporting the security organization in how they're going to message that and support the team to actually fix the things that are found. So that is, I would say, at a high level, how we do things and what we're doing.
Yeah. And I love that you mentioned they have to stop the revenue generating activities. So many in the audience may not understand. So I say this all the time. Years ago, I'm older than you. Years ago, even the language you're using right now would have felt intangible. So most people understand that they have a product. They get that. That's tangible, right? I got a product. I've got something. But what they don't understand all the time is the intangible risks that are happening. So if I could dumb it down to Valerie world, if you have a product that a hacker hacks, and if you don't know what a hacker is, please just go Google it. Hacker hacks. And that means, like, if you're in your house and the threat actor knocks on the front door, they're not really knocking on the front door. They're probably going through the chimney or they're climbing through a window. And because they're doing that, your family's at risk. So think about your entire organization and think about how, if there is no product to sell because somebody came through the window and injured your product or your family, you then have no company. You have nothing. In other words, it stopped the revenue generating activities because somebody came in and stole it. Basically, it's a dumbed down version for Valerie. But anyways, so what you guys are doing is you're seeing a need in the marketplace where there is other pen testers. We know that this happens. But the larger organizations have sort of lost touch with their customer, and they're commanding a price that indicates that they should not be lost touch with the customer. Just, you fit into our box versus the other way around. Is that correct?
Yeah, 100%. Okay. And it took us some time. That was a hypothesis that we had when we started the company. And it took us some time talking to multiple customers and, having a lot of sales calls to really hone in on where the pain points were. Because again, we are in many ways a commodity where there's many firms and many people who do the same services we do. So why would somebody choose us over them? And we had to hone in on that messaging and hone in on the triggers and the drivers for our customers so that they would not only entertain a conversation with us, but actually opt in to try us out. And then, once you get that opportunity to be tried, you can't drop the ball. So we always joke that, you can hire us. We can't afford to give you a bad report because our name and our brand and our reputation are everything at this point, especially when you're building a company. So try us. And if we drop the ball, you don't pay. We don't do this for everybody, but we've tried that a few times, and it worked in our favor where we delivered some quality work and the customer was very happy. And of course we got paid.
And then you hit another key part of growing a company. You were actually pressure testing the market with your original hypothesis, right? Which means what you might have started with is not what you always end with. There's a problem. You don't know how to actually do that. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, there are very few disruption products out there, right? There's repurposing of similar ideas. I mean, in that kind of for thinking, we think all the time that somebody's going to have a Steve Jobs and we're going to hit this market, but even Steve Jobs didn't hit a new market. I can actually trace back, right? But what he did do is a different marketing campaign that captured the imagination of that. I mean, even Simon Sinek, his Golden Why was done by lots of other people way 30, 40, 50, 100 years before. And it got repurposed or hit at the right time. So one of the key things that, I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, but one of the key things that I have found is it's all in that repurposing of how you approach the need in the marketplace, right? If the need in the marketplace is the fact that they've lost touch, that organizations want a concierge service or whatever that is, you've got to be able, as a founder, to pivot enough to make that happen, right? Toilet paper's toilet paper. You know, rice is rice. How do you read? How do and we used to always say travel is travel. But if you're explaining to an airplane to somebody from the year BC 100, they're not going to understand it, So I think you're doing a good job at repurpose. I mean, like, you're right. That exists out there. I mean, we could go analog and stop the whole thing.
You know what? Some days I'm ready for it. I'm like, enough. Like, I am too connected. I'm too tapped in. If I lose my phone, I'm doomed. So yeah. How could we go backwards? And then I think about, if we're just going on this tangent on technology, how people have to continuously keep up with it. And I think of my friends who are in their 80s, and I'm like, you're learning how to use an iPhone and you have a new car and everything is touchscreen. Like, how mind-boggling must that be? And
Yeah.
it continues, right? Because technology isn't slowing down. So yeah, back to the kind of figuring out our market niche. It certainly helped when we identified that our competitors were dropping the ball in quality, right? Because you don't hire a firm like us just to get a check the box. You can do something else, right? There's many other ways to get a check the box. But if you are hiring a firm to do a deep penetration test, do that deep hack, and they're dropping the ball, there's a problem there. And if we can come in and prove value and then treat the customer with respect and the consistency of a boutique consultancy, it's a whole different feeling, and it builds loyalty and connection. And that's, one of the main drivers for us as well.
Awesome. So you finished year one. So what did you learn, and what's up for year two?
What did we learn? Everyone takes much longer to start a project than we would like, right? I think we definitely, we underestimated the time legal takes, the back and forth, and early in the business, we had to make some tough decisions around risk management on what we're going to accept in contracts and what we're going to sign and what we have to push back on. Because again, as a small firm working with these large organizations, Fortune 50, Fortune 500, we can, small firm, take our lawyer and push back and, go back and forth for 6 months on red lines. But that is 6 months that we're wasting of generating revenue, right? Of building our clientele, building our testing skills, all of the things. So we had to make some decisions on, where that line was. That was an early pivot, because early on we said, no, we have to push back. And then about a few months in, we're like, nope, let's just sign as long as it meets our risk requirements.
You brought up a great point with that, because I don't think many think about that. They don't. I mean, the clients that I've worked with in growth strategies, there is, I didn't realize that with the school district, it takes a year to get through everything. And you just forecasted to have all this drop down. So what are you going to do in between the year's time? And then the acceptable risk, if that's a tenuous, that's hard for founders, because they're the ones with the risk on their shoulders, right? You go from employee land and you're kind of like, well, it's the risk of the company. But founders That's hard. How did you guys come up with the line for risk? Like, what was your thought process behind that? I'm not asking you to tell them what you'll accept and what you don't.
Well, and actually at this point, we're very transparent. We say, hey, well, these are our constraints. If it's unlimited liability, meaning something happens and they can sue us for whatever they want, we won't sign off on that because it's too intangible and, again, risky. And we have to meet the company's insurance requirements, which in and itself, we had to up our insurance, which is another cost, right? So we assumed, I think we started with $1 million in liability. We assumed that would be enough. And then the bar to entry for some customers and organizations was much higher. So we have to make that decision. Are we willing to invest more for a hypothetical customer? And, again, in the end, we had to put more money down, but it's worth it because then you are able to level up who you're working with.
And do you think that that's going to get to the point of being able to scale? Because eventually, I'm assuming year 2, you want to scale further and further and further, like the decision tree that you just discussed. Is it in place? How do people think about that? Because again, you're going to get a salesperson or yourself that is tempted for cash flow purposes. Let's just say tempted. So how do you scale that? How are you guys planning on scaling?
Good question, Valerie. Right now, myself, my co-founder, and our 2 investors are lockstep in discussing these things. I think at some point we'll all be pulled in different directions. But for right now, the size and process is working. But every 6 months it tends to be I'm not going to say a reorg, but the decision tree has to be updated because requirements change. So I think it's an evolution.
Well, and I think you hit it spot on too. First of all, hackers are never changing, although they'll go to the path of least resistance, right? We all know that. Back in the day, I was working tax and accounting, and it was before some of this stuff. And it was like, well, we'll just go break into an H&R Block and steal their computer. That was the hacking. It was like, but we do have organizations that have antiquated systems, and it's expensive to bring it up to speed. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about every 6 months, that's not bad I think that's a great point to bring out to startups to realize that they are going to have to, at first, they have to go with the market conditions. So if that means an update every 6 months, plan that into your plan. That's what it sounds like to me, as you guys have decided every 3 6 months you regroup and say, is this still working, not working, because the market conditions that you're in is continual. It's not a snapshot in time. It's continual. So keeping up is half the battle for that kind of thing. So yeah, that's great. And then okay, again, for the future, year 2, are you guys how are you guys trying to grow?
So we are actively hiring more engineers, which is great. We're also, our core service was the hacking aspect. Now we're trying to move into more continuous, almost managed services for our specific niche, product and application security, where we can support the organization throughout the life cycle, right? So when we get to it today, when we get to a pen test and we break into this product, there were a lot of things that happened beforehand that shouldn't have or should have happened. And so taking that root cause analysis of, hey, these are the problems that you have today that we know about, how can we make sure that they don't happen again? That's what we're trying to do. So we're really, it's in our industry, the term shift left. It's that concept, but it's almost shifting, gosh, so punny, right from the start, building process and the people process, and then thinking about the technology versus in cybersecurity, it's all about the tech. And we're not always thinking about how do we manage what the tech puts out. And so we want to support more from a continuous basis.
Well, I think it's in bite-sized chunks when you do that. If you're continually working out, you do much better. If you work out once a year, you're going to be in pain for 2 weeks that make it so you only work out once a year, right? And it becomes much more expensive every time you do that. Tech is not going away, like you said, unless we have Armageddon, tech is not going away. And, the meme, the Google buys Pizza Hut kind of meme makes sense, right? Because, and if you don't know what that is, go look it up. It's hilarious. But we give up our freedom, our information, our stuff for ease. So if you want to go live on an island and go analog, then yes, tech will not be there. And yes, it's hard for somebody who is 80, but they're typically retired. So that is a problem. That's a whole phishing and a whole scammer game of something else, right? But for B2B, you will be connected somehow, some way, eventually, right? So you might as well have a continuous process of making sure that it's evolving along with it. So I love that. That's a great plan. That's a great plan of attack. And what's one of the best successes you've had so far? I would love to hear that.
Best success. I mean, we started a year ago with nothing, right? We had no customers, we had no documents, we had no process, we had no technology, we had nothing. We had laptops and a dream. And today, I mean, we just had a meeting with our advisors this week. I have a NASCAR slide of all the companies we're working with and people we're supporting, and they are well-known brands that we are making an impact to how they're securing their organizations. And that to me is a huge reward, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, I mean, we are the products. And so when there's a data breach at a company or a healthcare company that has my information, I suffer. They maybe suffer, but it's me as a human, or it's my family. And so to be able to make an impact, that's been a huge win. And to be in business 1 year later. Okay. Let's be real. Like, I don't want to get a new job at this moment. So it's nice to be, I'm not going to say profitable, but how about still kicking?
Still kicking. And that's another thing. Most of them are like, they think only top line revenue. You are probably correct for the first year, but you've got to have profit on the radar. And eventually you have to start to think through some of the bottom line, ending line, especially when you have investors, for sure. So a lot of them don't understand that you may not be profitable your first year. In fact, you may not the second year, and risk inherent with that. You've got to be able to make it through that. So that's really cool. I want to sort of move us into more you personally. You work with women. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing and how you got into that side of it.
So I work in technology and security, two industries that are predominantly male driven, right? So for most of my career, I've been the only woman in the room, which, there's detriment and benefit to that. Naturally, I was the one taking notes, right? And so that turned into, you could look at it two different ways. You can look at it as, you're brushed aside and you are kind of the subservient person to the team. But I moved that into more an empowerment where I said, okay, I'm taking the notes. So I'm now going to direct the meeting, right? You say something, I'm going to write it down, and then we're going to move on to the next person. So that was something I had to learn as I was growing in the industry. And so myself and a good friend of mine, Terry McLean, she and I have created this Women in Tech events where we have a panel of speakers. We bring in sometimes an author. We just use a book to kind of anchor us in a conversation. And we have done this nationally, and we get about 50 to 100 people in a room, mostly women. And we just talk about some of the challenges of working in a male-dominated industry. Specifically, one question was, what would you have done if you were 20 when you were coming up in your career. And it's very reflective, right? Because I think we accept things when we're younger that are unacceptable now. And how can I teach people coming up in tech the things that are not acceptable and that you shouldn't just accept because you are newer in this space. Like, don't be taken advantage of. But I wasn't confident enough then to say something. I had too much self-doubt to talk back to a hiring manager about, the inappropriate behavior. So that's, one kind of mission around it.
Yeah. I'm glad that you're mentoring in that. I think there's an element of that in cultural bias, anything that we deal with, right, is in coaching various leaders or different things. I find that there's a neediness factor. And when you're younger, trying to make your way through things, sometimes it's just like if you're closing a sales deal, right? If you need it too much, there's your risk that you were talking about. Do we want that? We'll make a decision, right? But if you need it too much, that you're willing to sacrifice, and I'm not saying that you don't have to sacrifice, you have to get along with people, but if you're willing to sacrifice your integrity, your just to get there, then you're going to have a lot of regrets in the past. And I know you're like, I have no regrets. And I'm like, good for you. I can't do no, that was for your business for the year. I meant so that I qualify. I'm sure that we all have regrets, but that you're mentoring so that you've learned to say, there's enough room to say if that person is mistreating you, and let's qualify mistreating. Just because you don't like something does not mean you're being mistreated, right? That's a given. But, and even if you don't like it, you don't have to stay. There's other companies. There will always be another job, another whatever that is. But if you are being mistreated and it's consistent, being able to stand up and say that's not okay. A lot of times when you're getting out of college or you're getting out of high school. Sometimes in tech jobs, it's actually out of high school, or in different countries. I can't say exactly where, a lot of times we do. We'll go, okay, yeah, I'll do that. And it's like, nobody else is doing that. Why are you doing that? And I love that you guys are mentoring that, because it's so important.
We try to both kind of share our personal stories, but also, the panelists that we often have are female executives, and they have made their way up, and there's lessons that we can learn, and specifically tactics that they use to advance their career or deal with specifically difficult people. And if they can share those stories on how they navigated an uncomfortable situation, I think it just empowers everyone, both, people starting out or people who are trying to move, or if they have a particularly uncomfortable work situation, how do you navigate it? So it's been incredible. It's been really rewarding. As you know, starting any free service, and it's a labor of love.
It is a labor of love. And sometimes we're paying it back forward. And sometimes we're going, why the heck did I start doing this? Okay, I'm going to do this. Maybe not. I think one of the things that I would love to pull out of this is you kind of had mentioned that, I think you mentioned this, and my brain is kind of, but you talk about if you weren't in tech, and I'm trying to remember the exact thing you said, if you weren't in tech and it had something to do with pets and animals. I'm sorry. My brain is just like out to lunch. If you weren't in tech, what would you be doing?
If I weren't in tech and money was no issue, right? If I was independently very wealthy, or at least could pay bills, I would be an artist. I would either be
Okay.
doing theater or I would be painting. Yeah, I'm very creative by nature and absolutely love that. And I do try and bring it into my business and, elements of, there's lots of creativity that goes into running a business on so many different brain wavelengths. But I would be in the arts somewhere.
In the arts somewhere. And you said theater. So theater, that's a big jump, even painting and stuff like that, but that's a big jump because usually I find in tech, well, there's so many technological strains, so I can't really even say that anymore. But back when I was growing up, if you were tech, you were right brained, and if you were and everything. And of course, I run into a lot of IT people that, yes, there is no creativity in there. It's this is connect this, we're done and we're happy. And so that feels a bit unusual. That's why I was like, okay, I remember there was something unusual about it. She wanted anyways, so what kind? Musical theater,
Oh no.
theater, drama.
We're going drama all the way. And I always used to get cast as the villain, which I loved because it's way more fun to play a mean person. They have more character depth and it's exciting than, playing some damsel in distress.
So
What,
Mean Girls or
yeah, like give me the Mean Girls, which is ironic because the last book that we read for the women's group, which I strongly resonated with, was The Myth of the Nice Girl, right? And I read that, I'm like, oh my God, I'm a nice girl in business. I'm like, this is me. So, on stage, you want to play somebody completely different.
I have not read that book, and I'm going to have to write that down. It'll be in the show notes because it sounds like it's pretty crucial and something that I probably should be reading. I use numbers to protect myself, just transparency and the forecast, because I have this want to save everybody, and sometimes people can't be saved, and it's like, here's the numbers. Here's the thing. Do you agree? Do you not disagree? And that's my protection point.
I love that.
Because numbers do not lie.
Yeah. Empirical evidence is powerful.
Well, it is. I had, for one of my companies, I was coaching. Sometimes I get dragged into coach sales, and sometimes it's different things. And we're talking, and this person said, "Well, just nobody is buying." And I said, "Well, tell me a little bit more about that." It's like, "Well, it's the economy." And I said, "And how do I get around that?" And here, and I laughed. Sorry. I probably should not laugh, but I did, not to them because it was serious, but I laughed in my heart. And I was like, okay, if nobody's buying and you are in sales, what does this mean? Right? Let's connect the dots. Nobody's buying means no sales, means no sales position, means that. And I was just like, we're not here by virtue of, if this was a nonprofit, we could have that conversation. But here's the workaround. If they are not buying and they say it is due to the economy, then take them back to the economic downturn of 2008 and all the IBM employees got totally let go. Are you that IBM employee, or are you going to buy something that actually helps perpetuate your company's revenue to the next? Anyways, it's just a side note, but it just kind of cracked me up when you said that, the nice, and I'm going, how do you say that nicely?
Well, there's always excuses. Again, I came up in sales, so I know the grind. I love, and it's a love-hate. Everyone in sales is a love-hate thing.
Yeah.
But if you're in that situation, show me what you're doing. Like, show me the data of how you're trying. Everybody, like, well, who did you reach out to? Where did you pivot? Right? I don't take excuses like that kindly either.
Well, that
Even
was one of the most recent.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's relevant.
And it is relevant. And it could be economics. Great. If it is, then let's chat, maybe look at a different vertical. Let's do something like that. And in this person's defense, they were looking at they were like, should we go to a different vertical and things like that? But it was just kind of like, okay, wait, what? Anyways, so yeah, no, that is great. So if there was one place where they could get a hold of you, because I think sometimes people don't understand the hacking portion of this, and it does, you hear the word pen test and it becomes this commodity, and some don't even know what a pen test is, honestly, but especially who you're talking to, where would they get a hold of you? What's one place? We'll put others in the show notes.
Probably LinkedIn is the easiest. For better, for worse, I'm very active on it. And I'll say for depending on a company, we are seeing more and more large organizations who are working with smaller vendors requiring the services we're doing just to ensure that continuity of risk management throughout the supply chain, right? So you may be a small company and you say, I sell, flavor water drops. I'm doing business with a target, and that target who is, connected to you needs to know that you have security practices in place. And so that's where we are getting called, not a ton, but I'm forecasting that that's going to be futures for small companies. They're going to need to have more mature security practices, and, we hope to support them.
I would 100% concur. So anyways, and to talk to her more about that, and I know that you didn't mean probably the target, but just I'll throw it out there. The target was hacked because I was one of the lovely recipients of my nice little letter, and this was years ago, but my nice little letter that has me put my credit freeze on and everything else, that even when I get all my healthcare ones that got hacked and everything else that, sorry, pisses me off, it was done through an HVAC vendor. So one must never forget that third-party vendor risk is a huge thing. And just because you're little does not mean that you are going to have questionnaires. I'll just give you that plug. Call Clea and she will help you strategize and figure out if you are at risk at some kind of portion of it. And because Clea is so genuine, she'll tell you whether they can help you or not, or whether you really need their help or not, because that's just the kind of good human that they are at that organization. So I'll give them that plug. And if you like the show, come on, comment, like it, share it, send somebody to the podcast, because I think these are interesting dialogues that need to be had. And thank you so much, Clea, for being on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.